My husband's first crush was pregnant, and she came to my house begging my husband to take her, and I didn't agree, and that night she jumped off a flyover and died twice. Later, my husband promised me to go bungee jumping. The moment he pushed me down, he whispered in my ear, "If you hadn't driven Annie away, she wouldn't have wanted to die, and you owe her this life." He took out scissors to cut the rope, and I fell to my death from a height. Open your eyes again, I rejoined his first crush belly to my house to beg for stay that day. I smiled and said, "This is just a coincidence, I'm pregnant too, let's raise the baby together." A series of knocks came from outside the door. I woke up from my sleep. The nightmare I just had sent chills down my spine. I dreamt that David took me bungee jumping, and the moment he pushed me down, he pulled out a pair of scissors. He said to me with a hateful look on his face, "Sophia, if you hadn't been cruel enough to drive Annie away in the first place, she wouldn't have tried to find her death. You owe her this life. Go to hell." David cut the rope with scissors, and I fell to my death from a great height. There was a steady knock at the door and a familiar voice. "David, are you home?" I snapped back. It was Annie's voice. Annie was David's college crush, and in my previous life, David and I had been married for half a year when Annie came to the door. She said she was pregnant, and the father of the baby didn't want to recognize the child, let alone marry her. But she wanted to give birth to the child and begged David to take her in. I was pregnant at the time, and naturally I didn't want to let David's first crush in. So I politely turned her down. Annie left in despair, and David and I had a cold war for a day. Although he didn't say anything, his actions were already telling me that he blamed me for not taking Annie in. That night, David received a call from Annie. Annie said to him on the phone, "Oh David, even you want to leave me behind? I don't have any more attachment in this world. I am now on the flyover. Let's meet again in the next life." "Annie, don't think about it. Wait for me to come over." David was eating dinner. He immediately put down his chopsticks, grabbed his car keys, and headed out. I watched as David anxiously left the house and drove to the flyover that Annie said. My heart went a little bit cold. David came back at dawn the next day. He sat disheveled in the living room and smoked. I came out of my room and asked him, "How's she, Annie?" "She's dead, one body." David's eyes were red with remorse and regret. "Sophia, you shouldn't have turned her down. We don't lack a room for her in our house. Why were you so cruel?" I asked back, "David, you think it's my fault? There are plenty of rooms in hotels. Why did you have to stay at our house?" He didn't say anything and buried his head and smoked a cigarette. From there we started a cold war for a while, and as the baby in my belly got bigger, he started to reflect on himself. He realized it wasn't my fault. He bought me a trunk full of flowers to apologize. He took my hand and said, "Sophia, it's my fault. It's Annie who can't think for herself. I shouldn't blame you." I put up with it for the sake of the baby in my belly. From then on, he didn't mention that incident. He made me sandwiches and fried eggs every day, but the baby in my belly was still miscarried. I was devastated. He comforted me. "Sophia, don't be sad. We will have a child in the future. Let me take you to bungee jumping. I heard that the moment you jump from the sky, all your worries are gone." I went bungee jumping with him because I wanted to get rid of the boredom in my heart. But he gave me a fatal blow. It turned out that he had never let go of Annie. He had always resented me. He resented me to the point of pushing me down from the heights. Before he pushed me down, he cruelly told me, "Do you know why the baby in your belly can't be kept? Because I added something to the soup I made for you." I shivered with anger when I thought of these past events. He was so cruel to mutilate his own child for Annie. I got out of bed and pulled back the curtains to look out the window. I was reborn. Reborn to the day Annie came to the door with a big belly and begged to be taken in. David left for work early this morning and wasn't home. I took out the pregnancy test from the drawer, and now I am also 2 months pregnant. What a coincidence. If I was born again before I married him, how good would it be? I would not hesitate to withdraw from the marriage. This child came at the wrong time. Annie shouted outside the door, "David, are you there? Sophia, are you at home? Open the door." I put the pregnancy test away and slowly went to the restroom to wash up. I heard Annie pick up her cell phone and call David. "Oh, David, are you busy? I'm at your door and Sophia won't open the door for me." "What happened? Don't you cry yet." David called back to her on the phone. Wait for me, I'll be right back now. Annie waited outside the door for a good 20 minutes. I opened the door and looked at her. Something wrong. Annie had a suitcase at her feet. She rubbed her stomach and said to me, Sophia, I'm pregnant. The baby's father doesn't want the baby, and I don't have a place to stay right now. Can you and David take me in? I didn't know Annie very well. She came when we got married. I didn't know then that she was David's college crush. I wouldn't have married her if I had known David had a nostalgic first crush. David was on his way back. I pulled Annie inside and said with a smile, what a coincidence, I'm pregnant too, let's raise the baby together. Annie looked at my stomach and followed up with, how many months are you? Does David know? More than 2 months. He doesn't know yet. I'm not going to tell him for now. I had just finished speaking when footsteps sounded outside the door. David was back and he saw Annie and I sitting on the couch, first with a start, then with a sigh of relief. He went to get Annie some water and inquired, Annie, what brings you here? Is something wrong? I'm pregnant and I'm in a desperate situation, so I wanted to come to your house to borrow a place for a while. Annie finished with a glance at me and added, Sister Sophia has already agreed. David was a bit surprised. He pulled me into the study, closed the door, and asked me, Sophia, did you really agree to take Annie in? I said graciously, yes, she is in a desperate situation. If I don't take her in, what if she can't think of a way to die? Anyway, there are 3 rooms in the house, so it's not bad for her to have that room. Sophia, you are so generous. David's brow hangs with joy as he wraps his arms around my waist and prepares to kiss me. I felt disgusted and didn't move to push him away. He smirked, you're right, there's plenty of room in the house, so let her stay for a while. David walks into the living room and shushes Annie. Annie says she hasn't had breakfast yet. David immediately put on his apron and went to the kitchen to make Annie breakfast and said he was going to the grocery store later to buy ingredients to make her dinner himself. He also asked Annie what she liked to eat. Annie said shyly, you know I like cake. If it's sweet strawberry cake or chocolate cake, that would be great. David responded with bravado, okay, I'll buy them all for you later. I couldn't help but roll my eyes from my room. David packed out the second bedroom for Annie. He came over and greeted me, Sophia, I'm taking Annie to the grocery store, are you going? I blandly said, I'm not going, you guys go. David nodded, well then you clean up the house and I'll get you your favorite oranges back. Go on. I watched coldly as David and Annie left. After they left, I simply packed some bags and dialed a long-lost phone number. James, are you free now? Can we meet up? James responded without hesitation. Sure, where are you? I'll pick you up. No, I'll just drive myself over. I'll meet you at the coffee shop. James was in a happy mood and said, okay. I drove to the coffee shop to meet James. James is my college classmate who was the shining prince of our school. He used to chase after me, and after hearing the news of my marriage, he who never went to bars got drunk that night at the bar. We haven't spoken since the wedding, but I know from a mutual friend that he started his own business in the city and is currently single and unmarried. The coffee shop. James was already waiting for me. It's been a long time, and he's a little more mature than he used to be. He has curly blonde hair, and as he sits in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, the sunlight falls on his eyelashes and draws a lot of stares. After exchanging pleasantries, I said to him, James, there's something I'd like to ask you. Sophia, if you need anything, just ask. I spoke up, my husband and I had a fight, and I'd like you to come and stay at the house for a while, is that okay? If it hadn't happened in my previous life, I definitely wouldn't have opened my mouth and told my male friend that I wanted to stay at his house. But now I'm in a different frame of mind. David doesn't think it's okay for Annie to come and stay at our house. Then, I'd like to see how David would feel if I went to stay at the house of a male friend who had once courted me. James froze and then nodded his head. Sure, you can stay as long as you want. Just like that, I moved into James' house. After David and Annie finished shopping at the supermarket, they took her to the mall and bought her many sets of maternity clothes as well as daily necessities. They came home with big bags. David washed Annie's cherries and strawberries, set the cake with hot cocoa on the table, and brought it to her for her to eat. He then went into the master bedroom and told me to go out for some fruit. The master bedroom was emptied. David saw that the suitcase in the corner was gone and then opened the closet to see that the outfits I wore most often were also gone. He immediately called my phone. When I got his call, I was eating the fruit that James had cut for me. David asked, "Sophia, where are you? Why is your suitcase missing?" I blandly said, "It's a bit crowded at home. I moved in with James." David knew James and knew that he used to chase me. He'd always thought of James as a love interest. David exploded when he heard that and said angrily, "What are you doing moving to James' house? Don't you know the difference between men and women? Hurry up and come back here." I sneered. "You know that men and women are different? I thought you didn't." David realized that I was doing this because I was upset with him for letting Annie stay in our house. "Sophia, you're too much. You're the one who agreed to let Annie stay, and you're the one who's moving in with James. You're the one who agreed to let Annie stay, and now you're the one who's moving in with James. What do you mean? I pretended to agree as a test for you, but unfortunately you didn't stand the test." I didn't want to talk to him. I dropped the line, "That's it, James cut me some fruit, I'm going to eat the fruit." I hung up the phone. My last sentence was sarcastic on purpose. David grabbed his jacket and tried to come over to James' house to meet me. When he passed by the living room, Annie called out to him, "David, I heard everything just now. It seems Sophia doesn't welcome me. I'll pack my bags and leave now." David stopped and explained to her, "Don't take it to heart. Sophia is just having a tantrum. I'll go and pick her up. I'll pick her up and she'll come back with me. I don't want you two to fight over me, so I'd better go," Annie said as she went to the second bedroom to pack her bags. David didn't think she was joking, so he put down his jacket and coaxed her, "Don't you have no place to go now? I don't think you have a place to go now. Even if you want to leave, it's not urgent. I've also bought you so many fruits. David, you are so nice. If only you were the one I chose in the first place." Annie sighed with a look of regret in her eyes. Annie sighed, her eyes showing remorse. David's ears turned red as he asked, "Annie, why didn't you choose me?" Annie laughed lightly and said, "There were too many people chasing me at the time. People always look at the wrong time. Let's not talk about the past. Let's not talk about the past." Maybe Annie's words gave David hope. He decided not to go to James' house to look for me. He said to Annie seriously, "Don't go, you're not wrong. It's Sophia who's wrong. She's too careful. She's too careful. You stay here. If she wants to stay at James' house, then let her." David finished and told Annie to go to the living room to continue eating the fruit. David said and asked Annie to go to the living room to continue to eat the fruits. Annie said, "By the way, can you accompany me to the maternity checkup tomorrow?" "Of course I can. Tomorrow is the weekend. Even if it is not the weekend, I can still take time off work to go with you." David said yes without thinking. "You were a good man. Sophia is so happy." After praising David, Annie came back to criticize me. "You are so good. She is still with you. You're so nice, but she's still being unreasonable with you. I feel a bit bad for you. Hey, she does have a bit of a temper, unlike you, who is so understanding." David sighed. Annie smiled shyly, and the two of them made eyes at each other. The next day I went to the hospital, and when I came out of the operating room, I met Annie and David. David was surprised to see me in the maternity unit. He pulled me to the end of the corridor and asked me in a lowered voice, "Sophia, what are you doing here?" I turned pale, and my voice was cold. "Didn't Annie tell you that I'm pregnant too?" David wasn't surprised to hear that I was pregnant. He was just a little surprised. "What? You're pregnant too, Doc? What? Are you here for your checkup today?" I shook my head. "No, I'm here for the operation. I've already aborted the baby." David was furious. "Sophia, you aborted our baby without asking me? What do you mean?" David, get a divorce. "I wish you and Annie happiness." I turned to leave. James came from the distance. He had just gone to get my medicine. When David saw James, he rushed up to him and punched him, saying angrily, "James, you told my wife to get rid of the baby, didn't you? You want to die." James also punched David. The nurse came to separate the two. The nurse came to separate them. Annie came up and coaxed David, "Don't be angry, let's talk about it when we get back." I pulled James away, leaving David and Annie behind. David was so angry, he said to my back, "Sophia, think it over. If you go with him, we can't live this life anymore." I thought it through. Divorce. After returning from the hospital, I spent a few days at James' home to recuperate. After I could get out of bed, I moved out of James' house and stayed in a hotel instead. I had originally stayed at his home because I wanted to be angry with David and I was a bit impulsive. After I calmed down, I realized I shouldn't have done that. I filed for divorce to David. He was also angry, directly agreed, but in the division of property there are some differences. We have a suite in our name, a car, the two account a total of $300,000 deposits. Originally, we intended to sell the house and car, the couple's common property, divided equally. But Annie encouraged David. Sophia's salary is not as high as yours. How can we give her half? She can't get half of it. She's lucky to get 1/3. David thought Annie was right, so he proposed that the house should go to him, the car should go to me, and the deposit should be $200,000 for him and $100,000 for me. Of course, I didn't agree. Although my basic salary is not as high as his, my year-end bonus can cover his whole year's salary. I bought that car with my year-end bonus. We could not reach an agreement and had to file for divorce. While I was preparing the papers for the divorce, Annie was still staying at my house, and I was staying at a hotel. I had a big bathroom in the master bedroom with a bathtub. The tub was connected to an app on my cell phone that allowed me to remotely control the temperature of the water and the frequency of the hydrotherapy massage. On this night, a message popped up on my phone showing that the bathtub was in use. The water temperature was 40 degrees. I was immediately alerted. This bathtub is my own. David hardly ever uses it. He just likes to shower. What's more, he doesn't like to bathe in water that's too hot, 38 degrees at the most. I suspected that Annie was using my bathtub. There are 2 bathrooms in my house. Besides the master bedroom, there is a public bathroom next to the second bedroom. To confirm my suspicion, I dialed David's video call. David waited for about 10 seconds before putting the video call through. He was working in his study and looked at me in the video and said coldly, "What? You know you are wrong? I will never forgive you." I didn't answer him, but asked, "Is Annie in the master bedroom taking a bath?" David didn't think so. So what? The second bedroom doesn't have a bathtub, so she takes a bath in the master bedroom. We're getting divorced. We're getting divorced. What do you care? I'm impressed. I switched the video channel to a hover window, opened the bathtub app, heated the water up, and turned on the spa. I pressed the button for hydrotherapy massage all over the place. On the other end of the phone, Annie's scream came out. David quickly got up, walked to the door of the master bedroom, raised his voice, and asked, "Annie, what's wrong with you? Why is the water getting hotter and hotter? The water is spraying all over the place." Annie scrambled out of the tub. "Be careful, get out first, don't soak." David dropped this, went back to the study, picked up his cell phone, and questioned me. "Sophia, did you take control of the bathtub? Sophia, are you in control of the tub? Would you stop being so petty?" I frowned. I can't be generous enough to let another woman soak in my tub, so tell her to get out. Sick. David was about to yell at me when another scream came from the master bathroom. David did not even hang up the video, took the cell phone, and pushed open the door of the master bedroom, rushed in. The camera swept to Annie naked, lying on the bathroom floor, body wet. With a sobbing voice, Annie said, "David, come help me. I just came out of the bathtub, accidentally slipped and fell." David went over and took a towel over Annie and helped her up. He probably forgot that I could see it from my side. That's great. I pressed the video button. David helped the white table onto the bed in the master bedroom and asked her, "Are you okay? Did you have a bad fall?" Annie sensed something. Her face changed dramatically, and she said with embarrassment, "David, please call the ambulance. I think I'm bleeding." "I think I am bleeding." After she finished, David turned his back, and she stood up to take a look. She stood up and saw that my white sheet was stained red. "I'll take you straight to the hospital." David went to get Annie some clothes to change into. It's all Annie's own fault. She didn't use the bathroom outside. She had to come to the master bedroom to soak in my bathtub. If she doesn't fall, who will? She deserved it. David drove Annie to the hospital. Her baby didn't survive. Annie's crying. David comforts her, walks down the hall, and calls me. "Sophia, you're so mean. You and Annie are both women. Why do you have to be so mean to women? She lost the baby. She lost the baby. Are you satisfied now?" I nodded my head, quite satisfied. "Don't come back to this house. I don't want to see you." It was all Annie's own fault. She had to come to the master bedroom to soak in my bathtub instead of using the restroom outside. She deserved it. David drove Annie to the hospital and her baby didn't survive. Annie cried and cried. David comforted her, then went down the hall and called me. Sophia, you're so mean. You and Annie are both women. Why do you have to make things difficult for women? She lost the baby. She lost the baby. Are you satisfied now? I nodded my head, quite satisfied. Don't come back to this house, I don't want to see you. David hung up the phone. I didn't want to go home, I didn't want to see him and Annie. But when he said that, I didn't like it. It's my business, if I don't want to go home, he can't stop me from going home. Well, if he says he won't let me go home, then he and Annie can't go home either. I went home right away. There was still Annie's blood on the bedspread. It was bad luck. I called a bellhop to clean up the place, threw away the sheets and covers, and replaced them with new ones. I washed the bathtub several times with disinfectant. I also asked the maid to collect Annie's clothes and put them in the trash can downstairs. I changed the combination on the locks and installed surveillance cameras all over the house. After all this, I left the house. When Annie was released from the hospital, David brought her home. Annie saw her clothes in the garbage can, picked them up, and asked David, "Did Sophia do this? Did Sophia do this? Who else could it be? Forget it. I'll buy you some new ones." David took Annie home. At the door, David pressed the house code. The voice message said the code was wrong. David tried twice more, but it was still wrong. He tries the fingerprint lock again, but the fingerprint is no longer valid. Annie said Sophia must have come back and changed the code and fingerprints. David dialed my number, but there was a busy signal. I had blacklisted him. David called the locksmith to come and unlock the door. I called the property owner. "Hello, someone is picking the lock of my house. Please help me to stop it." Usually I contact the property owner if there is any problem at home. I have known the property owner for a long time. When the property owner arrived, he saw David bringing a strange woman home behind my back and suggested that David confirm the code with me instead of picking the lock. The locksmith, after realizing the situation, didn't dare to pick the lock and left with his toolbox. Neighbors came out to look and pointed at Annie, saying, "Who is this woman?" When she came, the lady of the house went out. Shame on her. Is the culture so open now? What's she doing here when other couples are having a good time? It's disgusting to be a mistress, isn't it? This man is also a fool. Annie's face turned red and white at the neighbor's comments. She turned around and left. David chased after her. Annie said to David in the car, "David, I didn't realize I would cause you so much trouble. I'll go to a hotel." David was humiliated by his neighbor. He nodded his head. "Okay, I'll book a hotel for you." David booked a hotel for Annie for a month and spent our joint assets. My girlfriend reminded me, "You have to prevent him from transferring the property." I've already thought of that. He has a habit of saving his own money. Now that it's come to this, he will definitely transfer the property to save a way out for himself. I want to catch him transferring his wife's assets. When the time comes to sue for divorce, I will be able to get more property for me. I also hired a private detective to follow Annie and David at any time to collect evidence of his marital infidelity. He came to my office door to block me. "As you wish, Annie has already lived in a live store. You can now tell me the password to my house, right? Can you tell me the password to my house now?" I didn't want to get entangled with him and told him the password. Annie had been recuperating in the hotel for some time, and David had been cooking for her every day using high-quality ingredients. He also took her shopping, bought her a lot of new clothes and daily necessities. My private detective took photos of all these. I looked at the photos. I just feel that I was blind. I usually scrimp and save. This is how he squandered on other women. Annie to her brother's wedding bride price is not enough reason with David to borrow 5,000 yuan. David concealed me lent to her. The two of them are playing a small plan in their hearts. Annie thought when she and David got good, this money cannot be. Pay it back. David thought in case we really go to the step of divorce, this money can be confused and take it for himself. A month later, David saw Annie moping and suggested taking her to relax. He said that bungee jumping could help people forget their troubles. Annie agreed and went bungee jumping with him. Annie also posted an ins, "My first bungee jumping in my life." In the photo, David didn't show up, but Annie took a photo of herself holding hands with him. In the photo, David is not wearing a wedding ring on his finger. After bungee jumping, they went to a bar and got drunk. David helped Annie back to the hotel and never came out of her room. After the private detective told me, I went to catch David and Annie in the act of adultery. Although David and I are divorcing, but has not formally gone through the procedure, he is a real marital infidelity. With the evidence of his transfer of marital property and marital infidelity, I formally sued for divorce. The next day, David woke up and talked to me once. He regretted. Sophia, I was wrong, so days are because of drinking too much. There will not be a next time you forgive. You can forgive me, let bygones be bygones, and let's get on with our lives. I know that he is not truly repentant. He just realized that the development of the situation is not under his control, and if it continues like this, he will lose his reputation. I calmly told him, it's too late, let's go through the divorce process. 3 months later, the divorce decree came out. David was the one at fault. He didn't get a penny of the property. At this time, he and Annie were already in love. Annie urged him to divorce me. She did not want to live in a hotel without a name. She didn't want to live in a hotel without a name. David hid the fact that he was out of the house. He said to Annie the house and the car were sold. The money was divided into half. Annie happily dreamed of marrying him. The house and the car were indeed sold by me, and I have all the money. David has no savings, only his share of the salary. I also recovered the money David lent to Annie and spent on Annie. He didn't dare to ask Annie for it, so he borrowed money from his friends. I bought a small office to live in, quit my old job, and took out some of my money to start my own business. One day I was in a coffee shop buying coffee and met Annie in the line. Sophia, what a coincidence. She greeted me with a smile. And touched the diamond ring on her finger. David proposed to me. Our wedding is scheduled for next month. I forgot to send you an invitation. I'll make it up to you later. If the diamond ring she was wearing was real, it would have cost more than $100,000. David was a big spender and had very little left in his monthly salary, so it would be difficult for him to spend more than $100,000 on a diamond ring. It's hard. It should be a fake ring. I replied, I don't need to send it out. I'm not available. Let's wait for another time. Her face changed slightly. Don't worry, David and I will grow old together. This marriage is for life. There will be no next time. There won't be a next time. My eyes fell on the diamond ring on her finger. Oh, it seems you don't know much about the goods. You want all kinds of garbage, and you can't even tell the fake diamond ring. She fiddled with the diamond ring on her finger and retorted, open your eyes, this is a real diamond ring. David bought it for $180,000. He didn't give you such an expensive diamond ring when you got married. Are you jealous of me? When David and I got married, he didn't give me an expensive ring like that. We bought our wedding bands together and chose the simplest style to make them easier to wear and not interfere with housework, and they cost just over $100,000 for the pair. I laughed out loud. Haha, David net household with his $100,000 plus salary. You think 3 months can? You think he can afford to buy you a $180,000 diamond ring in 3 months? You're a good liar. Annie said incredulously. What? He said he got half of the family fortune. You lied to me. The corner of my mouth hooked up a light smile. Whether I lied to you or not, you can find out by checking. Right, there is a jewelry store next door. Do you want to take your diamond ring to be tested? See if I lied to you or he lied to you. When Annie got in line, the barista asked her what she wanted to drink. She said, no. She left the cafe in a hurry. 10. If I'm not mistaken, Annie should have taken her diamond ring to the jewelry store next door for testing. I ordered 2 cups of coffee and sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass waiting for someone. I have an appointment with James today. My company and his company have business dealings. This meeting is for business. I want to talk about business. James was on time. After discussing the cooperation, I pushed a contract in front of him. James, please read the contract and sign it. If there is no problem. If there is no problem, sign it. James was reading the contract and I shifted my eyes to the window. Annie came out from the jewelry store next door. She was very depressed. It seems that the test results hit her very hard. It's funny. Annie takes the ring off her finger and throws it angrily into the fountain. She looked back at me sitting in the cafe and saw me looking like I was watching the show. My face was blue with anger. I smiled pleasantly. Today the sun is really good. The mood is also very good. James stole in to sign the contract. He looked up at me. It's been a long time since I've seen such a bright smile on your face. What's so happy about it? What happy things? I took my eyes back, and the corner of my lips couldn't help but rise. I ran into an old friend, and seeing her unhappy made me happy. James looked out the window. Annie had stopped a cab at the side of the road and left. James probably realized who I was talking about. Have fun working together. I held out my hand. James shook my hand. Nice working with you. David and Annie had sent out wedding invitations to their close friends a few days before. When Annie found out that the diamond ring was fake and David and I divorced with a clean slate, she went to David and said, "David, why didn't you tell me earlier? Honey, you can have my paycheck after the wedding." Annie wasn't satisfied at all. "Your paycheck should have been given to me, but you only have a paycheck and can't even afford a car or a house. You can't even afford a car or a house, so why should I marry you?" David was a bit hurt and asked, "Annie, are you with me for the money?" "Not for me as a person," Annie said. "I'm not in it for the money." Annie said, "I am with you for your person, but it doesn't mean you can cheat me." The more she said, the angrier she got. "And what do you mean by proposing to me with a fake diamond ring? Do you think I'm stupid?" "Honey, I can't afford a real one, so I'm using a fake one." David raised his hands. And swore, "I swear when I'm rich, I'll give you a real diamond ring. Don't be mad." Annie's eyes were filled with disgust. "Forget it, I don't know how long you'll have to save up your salary to buy me a diamond ring. Annie, that's not what you said when I didn't divorce Sophia." David's eyes reddened, and he was very disappointed in Annie. With Annie. "You said that no matter what you would stay with me." Annie impatiently interrupted David. "Stop. Women's sweet words and men's words in bed are not. Without a financial foundation, who are you to make me suffer with you?" Annie said calmly, "Cancel the wedding. I won't marry you. David yanked Annie's wrist and growled, "The invitations have already been sent out. If you say cancel now, what will my friends think of me? I've done so much for it in the first place." Annie tried to break free from David. She was also angry. "I was blind in the first place. Bye-bye. Annie, you bitch. You destroyed my family, and now you tell me you're blind," David yelled. Annie was shocked by his look. She showed her weakness and said, "I'll tell you what, let's postpone our wedding until you can afford a real diamond ring. Then I'll marry you. I'm not asking for much, at least a 1 carat. David threw Annie on the bed. Afterward, he lit a cigarette and exhaled, his eyes terrifyingly calmed. I was so busy with my business that I didn't pay attention to David and Annie. One day, my girlfriend screenshot Annie's ins and showed it to me. Annie showed a diamond ring, the whole process of David taking her to buy a diamond ring, and the credit card statement, 188,000 yuan. She was wearing a diamond ring and leaning happily on David's shoulder, having a candlelight dinner with him. My girlfriend and I said, "A while ago I heard from friends that their wedding was canceled, and now I heard that the wedding was held as scheduled, so I don't know what's going on." They're both nuts. As far as I know, David can't afford $188,000 for a diamond ring at this point in time. I have a wild guess that he borrowed money from the internet. He's a sore loser, and he wants to save face. If the wedding is canceled, he won't be able to hold his head up in front of his friends and relatives. Therefore, even if he borrowed a loan, he had to buy a diamond ring first to make Annie happy to marry her home before. If Annie knows that she has to pay back the loan together, will she still be able to laugh? On this day, I met Annie again at the coffee shop. She flashed the diamond ring in her hand in front of me in a victorious manner. This time, it's a real diamond ring. David took me to buy it himself, and I watched him pay for it. You've never worn such an expensive diamond ring in your life, have you? I rolled my eyes indifferently. Annie took out a wedding invitation from her bag and shoved it into my hand, saying with a smile, "We're getting married the day after tomorrow, so if you're free, come and join us." If you are free, come and join us. Don't be a clown in front of me. I don't give a damn about you guys. I threw the invitation into a nearby trash can in front of her. She continued, "I've been trying to get pregnant, and David has been cooking me fancy food every day. By the way, you lost a baby, so you have to make up for it so you won't fail to conceive." Her words poked at my pain, reminding me of the last time I was lying on the cold operating table. Congratulations. The corner of my mouth spread a cold smile. You are newly married. I will give you a big gift. I'll give you a big present, I said and turned to leave. Annie denied. You've got it all wrong, don't you? It's just a friend's meeting. I got sand in my eyes and he blew it out for me. It's not what you think. Where did you get sand in a nightclub? You're still lying. David pinched Annie's neck. The cabbie pulled over. Can you guys go downstairs? This one. I'm not taking any more orders. Get out of the car. David and Annie were kicked out of the cab and walked home. Afraid that David would hurt her, Annie confessed, Hubby, I'll be honest with you, Alden has a money-making project. I originally wanted to understand the program and let you do it, but it's not what you think. As you know, we're not in a very good financial situation right now, and we're struggling to make ends meet, so if he can help us out, we'll have a lot fewer years to struggle. Point one. And don't think that you're going to think that Alden's program is a good idea. And don't think I didn't know you took out an online loan. Not only did I not blame you, I even tried to help you get the money. But you suspect me of being unfaithful to you. You disappoint me so much. Annie said seriously. David was half believing. Are you serious or not? That Alden has a lucrative project for me to do. Of course it's true. You know that I was pregnant with his child, and he feels he owes me a favor, so he wants to make it up to us. He wants to make it up to us. But you just smashed Alden's head in indiscriminately, so you'd better pray he doesn't come after you. With Annie's words, David's anger was half gone. He wanted to turn around and go back to Alden, but Annie held him back. Forget it, the club manager will take him to the hospital. Let's just go home. David nodded. Okay, we will buy some fruits to see him tomorrow. The next day, David really bought fruits and went to the hospital with Annie to see Alden. Annie had sent a message to Alden last night saying that she had a job to do. Alden said that there is a lucrative project for the couple to make up for Annie's loss, and it depends on David's sincerity. David was burnt out by the loan and Annie was urging him to buy a house. So he flattered Alden and the two became friends. On New Year's Eve, Annie proposed to invite Alden over for dinner to promote the project. The couple prepared a table of good food and wine and invited Alden to their home for dinner. At the dinner table, David drank too much and Alden hooked Annie with his foot under the table. The two men continued to fill David with alcohol, and after he drank himself unconscious, he fell asleep on the sofa. In the middle of the night, David was awakened by thirst, and he vaguely heard unpleasant sounds coming from the master bedroom. He staggered closer and put his ear to the door to hear Annie and Alden conversing. Honey, do you think my husband is going to wake up? If he finds out, he's going to be in trouble. I haven't gotten back at him for the last time he hit me in the head, and today I'm sleeping in his house. His wife. That idiot really thinks I'd give him a money-making project. He doesn't even know how much he weighs. David was furious as he listened to the conversation inside. He rushed into the kitchen with a kitchen knife and kicked in the door. Annie was shivering with fear. Alden was a rich man who had long wanted to take revenge on David. Don't be afraid, I won't lose in a fight this time. Alden comforted Annie, rolled over and got out of bed, took a vase from the bedside and put the vase on the floor. Alden comforted Annie, rolled out of bed, took a vase from the bedside and opened the door of the room. He wanted to hit David's head to avenge the injury he got last time, but he didn't realize that David had a knife in his hand. David rushed up to Alden with the knife and hacked at him. Annie screamed and called the police with her cell phone. Alden collapsed in a pool of blood. David rushed to cut Annie again. He has lost his mind. Annie hurriedly hid in the master bedroom bathroom and locked the bathroom door. David was banging on the door yelling, "Open the door, Annie, you bitch! Open the door, you bitch!" Annie realized that she had overplayed her hand and cried out, "Hubby, I know I'm wrong, don't be impulsive." Before the police arrived, David had already pried open the bathroom door. Annie cowered in the tub, shivering and crying, "I was wrong, I was really wrong. You don't have a chance." David's eyes reddened. A trail of blood splattered across his face and onto the bathroom mirror. The next day, David and Annie made the social news. Alden bled to death. Zitong was in intensive care, covered in gauze and looking like a mummy. David was arrested and sentenced to death. Annie became a vegetable and was told that she would die once her medication was cut off. Her family is not well off, but they don't have much money to pay for her treatment. When I heard the news, I was on vacation in Maldives. I chose a 7-star island soaked in the infinity pool, blowing the wind, drinking champagne. Don't know how cozy. The company's recent turnover is very substantial. I hired a highly paid professional team in the management. The success of this venture is attributed to my keen sense of business sense, and I have chosen a new track to stand on the wind and be taken flying. Of course, in addition to this, there is also my own efforts. In the evening when I went to the restaurant, I saw a familiar figure. I greeted James. James, why are you here? What a coincidence, right? No, as far as I know, James' company is busier than mine. He doesn't have time to travel at this time, so it seems that he is here for me. He's been chasing me hard lately. I get flowers and gifts from him every day at work. He is one of my company's partners. We are strong together in business mutual benefit. In terms of relationships, he is a good choice, but after being hurt once, I am not in a hurry to start another relationship. James sat down opposite me. Sophia, why don't you let me accompany you on your vacation? It's too dangerous. It's dangerous. I smiled and said, it's not dangerous. Why are you free? James said, as long as you want to come out, I can arrange a time anytime. Let's not talk about it. Cheers. I raised my glass and toasted with him to the beautiful scenery outside the window. Later on, both of our careers became bigger and bigger, and each of us shone our own light and illuminated the other. 3 years later, I boarded a cruise ship in Antarctica, and James came with me. He proposed to me in Antarctica. Looking around, there is an unpolluted land which is so refreshing. The scars of the past had healed without me realizing it, and I found the courage to start a new relationship. I promise you. I held out my finger and watched James place a dazzling diamond ring on my finger. He held me in his arms as he circled the South Pole, surrounded by penguins who witnessed our happy moment. At the same moment, David was executed. Annie's EKG went straight, no more ups and downs.